Welcome to the Connected podcast. We're talking to James Hanley today about AI and the impacts on architecture and design firms for the future. There are some exciting things, but also some considerations in how we can also work with digital and ensure that we have a balanced life as well. So let's head on in. Welcome to the Be Connected podcast. We have James Hanley here today, and we're going to be talking about the future of AI, both in architecture and the built environment as a whole. So tell us a little bit about where you're at the moment and a bit of your background and story and what's led you to where you are today.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for having me. I am week 2 into my role as Chief Technology Officer for FK Australia. I did 5 years, like yourself, at Grey Puck Centre as their sort of digital delivery design technology manager, which was sort of the IT and technology side. A lot of people don't know, but I actually started my career as a technologist, like a technician. So I joined a practice and had to learn Revit very quickly in the face of deadlines and just became really good at that technology. And so then I sort of
Well,
moved
you
in.
worked in the UK, you've worked in New Zealand, you've worked for a lot of globally
Yeah.
great firms as well.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. So I sort of just followed when I was young and had the ability to sort of followed wherever I wanted to go in terms of jobs and roles, etc. So through that course, I sort of just worked my way through into the technology side and the business support side of a business, which I thoroughly enjoyed. I sort of enjoy being able to make up my own pathway instead of sort of that traditional architectural pathway. And that's landed me at FK today, which is
Yeah,
fantastic.
brilliant. And I mean, you've also written a book on AI as well. So do you want to tell us the name of that and what it's about?
Yeah, sure. So I wrote this book called Remaining Human in the Age of Artificial Intelligence. And I sort of had a penny drop moment. My wife was pregnant with our first child, and I sort of just thought, oh my God, I'm researching all this technology and artificial intelligence every night, 5 nights a week. And I was thinking, like, what world am I going to be bringing kids
Mm.
into? So I sort of just ended up writing this book around, hey, let's not forget that we're all humans trying to do the same thing day in, day out. We struggle with stress and burnout, and we're all trying to climb ladders and careers and be successful. How do we just sort of take a break and manage a healthy relationship with technology? And then also, I'm very cognizant that how do I portray my relationship with technology to my children?
Yes,
So I sort
really
of was,
important as well.
yeah,
I mean, you and I both share the part that, we like being out in nature. You get up at 4 or 3, is it?
yeah,
I don't know.
four was
4,
early.
yeah, I get up at 4:30 most days. We both are very much about being outdoors and keeping fit, although you
Yeah.
absolutely run rings around me with your ultra marathons and your 100K lunch. I thought when I had children, that's not happening for a little while
Oh,
now, but
yeah.
I see the light at the end of the tunnel. But I 100% agree. I mean, I think when you have small children, and we did our first podcast was actually with Meg Price, who's doing a PhD
Yeah.
on AI and human flourishing, and really in that kind of opened up my brain around AI, and now it's become a
Mm.
massive part about what I do as
Yep.
well. But it is that, and that's the really hard thing. We see the behaviors of what children have and
Yeah.
what that's doing. So even simple things like our house, we don't watch television during the week.
Mm.
We try to really limit that. The house
Yep.
we're in, it was really hard. We've just
Uh-huh.
moved and they can get outside. But
Yeah.
even cognizant of how much they see us sitting on our phones and
Yeah.
doing that, I often say to my partner, I'm like, just put it down.
I
Like,
know.
we don't need to look at it. So, what were some of the things that you sort of identified in that and sort of some of the things you thought about?
Look, to your point, setting and maintaining boundaries around technology. No
Mm.
phones in the bedroom, no phones at the dinner table, a very set time, maybe 1 hour a night for TV. My kids are very young at 3 and 1, so that's not so much of an issue. But
Mm.
of a weekend, for example, getting outside, being in the
Yeah,
yard, like not being connected to devices, like
yeah.
maintaining your relationship with nature. Instead of being in the doctor's office every day for supplements, like just those things that when you sort of click, they just, oh yeah, that is pretty logical. But you sort of
Mm.
get so tied up, and especially in our industry where everything's a deadline, everything's a race, people just hit burnout so quick and then they wonder
Oh,
why, like, and why they
absolutely.
get sick and why they get run down. So it was just about like, how do you sort of maintain relationships with people that are close to
Absolutely.
you and at distance? I've got a brother in the UK, so technology is actually amazing for that. But then how do I maintain a relationship with my family closer to
Yeah,
home? How do I sort of manage my time between work and switching off and
yeah.
just being really mindful of being
I
healthy?
kind of look at digital in a way, and we're going to talk about how
Mm.
amazing it is and all these things are always going to go. But I look at it in our, and we're doing a few courses and part of our Beyond Academy on this and peak performance type stuff. You can imagine digital fatigue coming into your brain and doing those types of things and habits to build
Yeah.
around that. But if you think about it, our phones have become like sugar, right?
Yeah.
They're on us all the time. We're doing it. There's all these things. Everything's built to get us addicted to it. We've changed our entire behavior. And in some ways, you also have to be careful what you eat, what you do when you're consuming sugar, what it does to you. But you're
Yeah.
doing the same thing to your brain, right? Like if
Mhm.
you pick up your
Yeah.
phone in the morning and you're looking at social media, you can say goodbye to about a lot of your mental energy has already gone. You've already
Yeah.
started your day not in a peak performance type of thing. But look, that's a
Absolutely.
whole other thing. You and I can have a whole other discussion on peak performance and
Yeah.
digital management. It's fantastic. So let's talk a little bit about AI. Obviously, today, AI is this thing that's been around since the 50s, but we're probably seeing it more and more. I was just talking to somebody, we've just built an entire website in a day type
Yeah.
stuff. Well, not quite in a day, but
Yeah.
instead of it taking 6 months to
Yeah.
build the
Sure.
last one, now it's just something you can do things quite
Mm.
quickly. That's one example. I think
Yeah.
now in the last, I've been running a business for 2.5 years. I think in that time, now where AI is and the speed of which it is changing, you
Mhm.
can't be just figuring out where it is. I would
Yeah.
predict that where we are today and where we are in 5 years by 2030 is going to be more expedited than where the impact of social media and our phones has had. And it's going to be very interesting. It's going to be interesting. Also, we
Yeah.
can put that at the end and what a play game is going to play on our brains as well. But let's talk a little bit about where you see AI coming into, and we're going to talk in architecture because that's mainly
Sure.
where you've been, but I think the built environment in general. So engineers and builders and people like that too.
Yeah, definitely. Look, as you pointed out, I've spent my career in the architecture space, so it's quite easy to talk to that. Obviously, at the moment, I think architecture is well and truly focused on early stage visualization.
Yeah.
I've been, and it was amazing, right? I think it was amazing because we were always told that creative jobs were going to be the last to automate and the last at risk. And AI sort of came out and threw that on its head almost
Mhm.
immediately. Like you could put into any sort of prompt engine, generate me a building with curves, flowing facade, etc., and you got that back. And it was this real like wow and sort of holy crap moment all at once.
Mhm.
These architects were like, wow, this is amazing. And then the dust settled and they're like, it's not that useful. But then those AI platforms have progressed so quickly in sort of 12 to 24 months that
Mhm.
you're now getting really high-end visuals out of that. And I think businesses, I think the glean has worn off that. I think we've been saying, well, what else can it do? What else can it do?
Mhm.
So at the outset, image generation was amazing, and I think that's
Yeah.
where architects have been focused on as an efficiency point of view. Can my visualizer or visualization team get 10 different versions of this
Yeah.
image out? And
Yeah.
absolutely, there's efficiency there. Whereas once upon a time, you'd have to
God,
re-render
it's
it.
taking days and hundreds of
Yeah,
dollars. And I think the thing is, though, I think the second part to this is around expectations, because now
yeah,
we're not only just having a world where with the architects being able to use it as a tool now. I think what's happening is we're going to see the difference in what clients expect. And I mean,
correct.
design is never valued
Yeah,
in comparison as much as where others
mm,
are. The amount of time and I work with everybody, and I love the architect. I love everybody. The architects do spend
mm,
the most amount of time doing the most amount of details for the least.
yeah, yeah,
Where that is that I can see that either means it's going to position people, designers, in a much better way to run things efficiently, or
mm.
it's going to flip and clients are going to sit there and go, I want to see the 20 versions.
Yeah, exactly. So it's I haven't quite landed on which way I think it's going to go.
I
I
will
think
watch.
it empowers architects to do a lot more, but then the devil is in the detail. Like you're then
Mm,
producing more for the same fees you were yesterday. And that's what I've been talking to architects. Like you're not necessarily being paid to generate all this extra content that in some ways, when you go into an AI platform and ask it to give me a render of a building or an image, some architects I've seen get exactly what they're after quite quickly. And they're like, oh, AI is amazing. I've seen other architects that come back to me on a Tuesday morning saying, James, I tried to drive this thing and I ended up further away from my design
mm,
intent and this thing's useless. So there's this whole education about how to drive what is seemingly a very simple piece of
mm.
technology, but you need to know how to drive it quite intimately.
And there's still the process. It's a bit
Absolutely.
like I was using something other day to produce something, and it was like, "Great, that's great." And then
Mm,
other times I'm like prompting, and I'm like,
yeah.
it's not getting
Yeah,
where
it's
it is."
not getting
You
me where I
gotta
want.
kinda know what the process that you need to
Yeah,
do and start with is, and
yeah,
that's what might hopefully be replaced, but I
yeah.
think it will be very interesting how that comes along. Now, I
Mm,
mean, probably right now, we spoke about this the other day, a lot of the wins can probably be on the operational side of the business
mhm.
with AI at the present. Is
Yeah,
that what you're seeing?
absolutely. I think a lot of businesses are still focused on that design side, but I
Mm,
think you've actually got so much, whatever you wanna call it, like low-hanging fruit in
yeah.
an architecture practice. Like, I'm sitting here looking at all of our policies and procedures as a new starter, so I was like, "This is ideal to have this chat right now because 'cause I'm 6 days into a job." You know, like, wouldn't it be amazing if I just had some sort of agent or co-pilot to sit there and be like, "Hey, I'm looking for our paid parental leave policy. Where is it? Oh, bang, here it is. This is what it's got. This is when you can access it, etc." So it's
Absolutely.
from an onboarding point of view, I think AI has a mile of capability in terms of helping us digest information and data across an architectural practice. Absolutely. So I think business operations has actually got a
Mm.
whole sort of raft of stuff that they could be doing so
Like
much more efficiently,
even
but we
in
haven't
very simple
really.
terms, and I would be surprised if people aren't doing this
Mm,
currently, especially if you're using something like Copilot, which will use it in your own system and
mm,
enable you to do that,
mm,
and there's heaps of others, but it depends on your security. That'll be
yeah,
the other thing we'll get into in a minute. But you know, you've got that ability to draw on. I know I've got
mm,
a friend of mine who's in sales, nothing to do with architecture. And she's like, oh, yeah, let's bring up the tenders that we've done for this and proposals we've done for this.
mm,
If you think about how many hours it would take a partner to sit down, oh, we got to go into this folder, find what are the last three submissions that
mm,
we did on this? Like
yeah,
over time, you would have and you should be able to. And if people aren't doing that today, that's the first thing that should
yeah,
be
yeah.
fixing
Oh,
the
but
depository.
even on the design side, right? If you are bidding for a competition, you can say, right, don't write me a methodology statement. I will craft that bespoke as a human to this project, to this
Mm,
contract. But it's a science project. Please dig through my asset library and find me the last 5 science projects we did. Order them by size, order them by Green Star deliverable, and tell me something notable about each of them.
yeah,
And like it's that information,
yeah.
and this is where we sort of talk about AI being the great leveler. If you're a smaller practice, but you know how to interact and use your data, you can start to level up and compete with those bigger companies that would be sitting on an absolute treasure trove and a mountain of data, but just can't get a handle on it at the moment.
Yeah, and I actually think that's where we're at right now. I think in 6 months' time to 12 months' time, we won't necessarily be in this position,
Mhm.
but I think in, mid of 2025,
Yeah.
if smaller firms are putting their head into AI, they have the ability to really
Mm.
expedite
Yeah.
and be able to compete. I think over time, I'm noticing bigger firms just because there's a lot more complexity. Oh, we have to get our heads around. And,
Yeah.
we've been there, a lot more processes of getting things
Yeah.
passed versus smaller firms who've got the director there. Yeah, we've got, oh, that looks great. Go. Off we go. Let's do it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's a bit more agile, but they have to be putting their heads into it
Mm.
as well. And I think that's
Mm.
the other thing we spoke about before we started chatting that you mentioned was that also we're now in a world where we have a new generation, and it's not. I
Mm.
think it's also people who want to put their head in and
Mhm.
realize I can't. AI is just not going to be a tool. This is going to
Yeah.
change how we work and
Yeah.
how businesses operate. Is that there's a new generation coming in and being able to produce a lot more in a lot less
Mm.
time. But if they're working in an environment where that's not enabled,
Mhm.
there's a lot of inefficiency there, but probably also a lot of disillusionment.
Yeah.
Whereas for a smaller firm who might be able to do that, they might be able to come in. I think you've had some situations yourself. You might not be able to mention
Yeah.
firms, but some situations where you've had people come in yourself. Is that
Yeah.
correct?
Well,
And show
yeah,
you some things.
there's so there is this so yeah, you are right. There is this, I mean, I'm of the digital native generation. I finished school in 2003. That's as the internet was firing up, all these sorts of things, great technology. Whereas the kids coming out of university today are just so deeply like their world is digital, right?
Yeah.
And so they're coming into businesses and I think there's an amazing opportunity for that cross-pollination, cross-training.
Mm,
The younger kids can teach the older generation about AI. The older generation can teach, and they so desperately need to do this. Hey, this is what you're going to encounter when you go out onto site, like the cranky old builder that is looking at your drawing that you and AI generated and can't make heads or tails of where the stair starts. So I think they've got this knowledge of like 30, 40 years of their craft and how to build a building.
Yeah.
They need to cross-pollinate that. But I think there's also this risk, and it's been a talking point in our industry, in the design industry, for a number of years, about brain drain. If I'm looking to hire at the moment, and this could be said for most practices out there, if I'm looking to hire a graduate who is very tech savvy, getting into the AI space, they're generally going to be appointed into a practice and said, hey, here is a 40-story tower we're working on, and here's the door schedule in Revit. Go do the door schedule. I'll see you in 6 months. Kids don't want to do that. I've spoken to a lot of people that are like, well, that's how I learned to do it. So you've got to learn by doing the reps. I'm like, learning by doing the reps is legacy. It was fit for purpose back at that time. But now that technology has evolved, you can't afford to push that method of training on people because they'll just get upset and leave. You've got
Yeah.
an enormous startup economy out there in the construction space. Kids will go there and get paid, my God, 3-4 times what they'll get paid in the design industry. So we've got to be
I'm going to say
careful.
that wasn't the case across all.
I know. So we've got to be really careful that.
Absolutely. I think the thing is that you, I think the other thing is that you actually want the people who are like that, but it's in the cultural part to be able to do it. But
Exactly.
on the other side, though, I mean, then you're getting to the whole learning space and how people learn and
Yeah.
all of that type of stuff. But, you know, there is a practical element there. But at the same time, I don't think people have the concentration space to
Um,
to sit there and do that at the
yeah.
same time. There'll be more mistakes. And honestly, if you can't work out how to make AI do your door schedules,
Mm,
and that would be your job,
yeah.
that would be the first bloody thing
Yeah.
you would be automating.
Yeah.
But that's the point. The other side of it is then they're not getting into the details. So, you know, I was talking to a project manager the other day. They're using obviously, you know, AI of certain part, you know, to read those things, to be able to pull it out, to be able to do it, making the job a lot quicker. However, it means they're not getting familiar with the small
Yeah.
details. If you're putting something that's really, really complex into AI, it's not going to
Mm,
give you, it's only going to give you the high level version.
no,
It's going to
yeah.
give you the headlines. It's not going to give you in detail.
Yeah.
So I think there is two elements there that, and this is what I'm going to be very interested to see how AI changes the way that we approach how we work and what we do, right?
Yeah.
Everybody walks around their phone, it's sitting right next to me. Everybody pretty much is on their phone. The first thing they do,
Mm,
it'll be interesting to see how people realize this is an AI tool I can do, but how do I also make sure I think? I
yeah.
mean, I saw some odd studies the other day. I haven't validated them, so let's be honest with that, where somebody was like, you know, AI has been proven to, you know, reduce people's intelligence.
Yeah.
But potentially, I'd be interested, and we're very early on, so those
Yeah.
studies would not be validated in the scientific community. But at the same time, I get it. You could
Mm,
easily get into this and you don't get
yeah.
into as much
Yeah,
detail that you are.
and you're right, because you, instead of going into a business and learning, you go into a business and you go straight into production, right? If
Mm,
you're using AI,
yeah.
because you're sort of saying, well, no, like you're going to work with this technology and it's going to help you do it, but you're not actually learning, well, what's required in that draw
Mm,
schedule? Do I need this information? No. And AI is not going to tell you whether you need it or not. It's just going to give you what you essentially ask for. So I
yeah.
think I agree with you. We've got to be really careful that we don't lose that learning, especially in architecture. Like we're not talking about going to the supermarket. We're talking about building buildings that people live and work in that are meant to have lifespans of 50 to 75 plus years. And they're so complex. So you've got to be learning what you're doing continually.
Well, the other thing is if you muck it up, you know,
Mm,
there's obviously been a building recently that obviously the structure fell
yeah.
down. And imagine, I'm not going to mention what and who, but,
Mm,
you know, those types of mistakes or not actually checking on those. And so that's where still as humans or as experts, you are being paid to have that level of knowledge and to do
yeah.
it. Otherwise, you're putting yourself actually at risk of being replaced by
Yeah.
AI.
Yeah.
So it's still about building your knowledge and understanding.
Mm,
And I will say, I think, you know, even just using large language model AI, if you know what you're talking about, it's a lot easier to get the exact
yeah.
answer you need. If you don't know what you're talking about, you can get a high level,
Mm-hmm.
but there can be mistakes in there that you may not realize. Now, I think it'll continue to evolve and to
Mm,
change, but I think it will. it's changing what even in our business,
Yeah.
we've pivoted to go, okay, the value proposition is here, now the
Mm.
value proposition is that, and that's why we're building our
Yeah.
own software,
Yeah.
so we're actually running the experiences versus
Yeah.
actually doing the compliance, which is all part of it, but it's like, what's the value add versus
Sure.
what's gonna be around.
Mm.
And I think it's interesting if you listen out there, the advice of some of the people out there is, if you want to have a profession now, what would you tell your kids to do? And I'd be 100% honest. You tell them to go and be a plumber or,
Yeah.
an electrician. Well, they're all getting paid a lot more than the professionals, I can tell you that.
Yep.
And they're impossible to find. So
Mm.
it is one of those things. There are going to certain professions that will have less, and it probably means we're more hands-on.
Yeah.
But it means that if you're in professions like architecture, engineering,
Mm.
project management, you're still on site, you're still doing things. So we could
Okay.
actually end up with, James, a very interesting part that a lot of things can be done through that. So you might
Mm.
go back to learning a lot more on site. Who knows?
Yeah.
We can't define the future there.
Yeah.
So let's talk sort of where we think, and we are not futurists. We don't have a globe
Um,
a ball, but just as an opinion,
yeah.
where do you think architecture may be and look like if you're an architecture firm in 2030 and then 2040? How do you
Yeah.
think
Wow.
firms might actually look?
Look, to be honest, I think 2030, you'll see minimal change. I think a lot of practices out there are still trying to understand what tools are out there. I think at the
Mm,
moment, the AI space is very much like the dot-com bubble. Everyone is trying to build something to make a quick buck and then get out. So, and this is what I see a lot of people like. They're sort of saying, well, I'm trying to find an AI platform that can help me do X. And there's 100 of them. How do I find out which one's got staying power? Which one's going to be here in 5 years' time?
mm,
So
yeah.
I think at the moment, in terms of our business models, the way our contracts are structured, the way we deal with data privacy and security, and some of these big decisions on projects, I don't think there will be a lot of change in terms of the
Mm,
design side of architecture. Sure, we'll be working around the edges and looking at visualization and maybe some modeling, but by and large, because of the legal and the contractual responsibility, documentation will still be largely manual,
yeah.
i.e.
Okay.
carried out by a human. By 2040, though, I think we'll start to see a larger shift towards, and it's funny, I talk about AI, but I also talk about automation. I think by
Is one of the
2040,
yes different,
well,
but
they're different because automation can be done completely without AI. Okay. So I
yeah.
think we will largely see a lot more design work farmed out to AI. And actually, farmed out is the wrong term. A lot of your architects will be partnering with an AI. I think you'll see agentic AI well and truly up and running by the 2040s, which means you'll be able to sort of give it a multi prompt to say, hey, I need you to go into software X, design this, take it into software Y, get a schedule out into software
Mm,
C, and then send it on to a contractor. So I think agentic AI will be a large player, but I think in terms of architecture, the next few years are pretty critical to understanding, well, how can we use our data? What responsibility do we have across a very large project team?
yeah.
And where does that risk lie? So I think it's exciting. Don't get me wrong. I think the short term view at the moment that I'm sort of hearing a lot is we're sort of just dabbling and we're doing a lot of testing, but we don't dare push it into production because there's a few risks. But I think that will change in the longer term by the 2040s to say, right, we understand that we can use AI for this. This is where
Mm.
the risk lies. This is where the reward lies. And this is who will benefit. And this is how we protect our data.
Yeah. So, for example, I mean, because I do want to talk about the documentation, because when I think about the architecture part, that is where most of the fee is. That is where most of the work is,
Yep.
and actually that. And the hard part there is as you said, door schedules might be. If you mark out a door
Mhm.
schedule, that is millions of dollars, right?
Yep.
You do not want to get that wrong. I also find it interesting because when you're talking about it like that, there's two things that come to my mind.
Mhm.
How do we improve this and
Yep.
remove the really time consuming things that really aren't, as you said,
Yeah.
graduates come in and people are just documented buildings for
Mm.
months. And,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, whereas on the other side, then it's also then, even if you've got graduates or somebody doing it, you need to have a good QA process
Yeah.
too. So it'll be interesting on the other side how quality
Mm.
actually is implemented, but you won't be able to do quality
Yeah.
if you don't know how to put a building together, right?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
But is that for the documentation side, is that what's stopping it from being automated better?
Well, there's nothing stopping it right now. There are tools out there to automate documentation. I've spent the last sort of 12 months heavily looking and implementing a tool that does exactly that.
Yeah, right.
I think that I'll get shot down by every architect out there, but our industry has a glacial adoption rate when it comes to technology. The general we, have spent decades mastering our craft and designing and sketching and all this sort of stuff. And I think at the moment we're tied to outdated, archaic desktop software. And I think we're
Mm,
actually starting to see now this sort of explosion of web-based, highly interactive, highly customizable tools
wow.
that might sort of finally shift the architecture industry away from you need to be running this massive software on your computer and drawing line work here and drawing line work there and
Oh, massive
doing this.
servers and cloud and
Yeah. So this takes me back to my sort of previous comment around sort of the pace of change in the 2030s and the 2040s. I still think we've got a few more years to actually realize that, hey, we might need to shift our investment from these big old
yeah.
softwares into something that's up and coming. And I include AI in that space. So I think and that's not even AI in terms of automating documentation. That's just software that you can use and download and run. But I think AI will become much more involved in that process in the future,
Mm.
but
Oh, I
there's gonna
can't
be a
imagine how
big.
it can't be. I mean, at the end of the day, if you've got a building code and you can put in there and you can say the dynamics of this, we want the windows to be this, we need this
Yeah,
much space, and the engineers need this, it could even be everybody inputs into it. I
and
cannot
that
imagine
is
how that can't be done.
that is coming now. There is a platform out there that is essentially Text-to-BIM. I have and you're just
Do you
typing in.
mind telling me what it is? Because I'm just
It's
very
yeah,
curious. But
it's called Hypar,
right.
Hypar. These people got together and just sort of said, "Look, we need to think about the next evolution of building information
Absolutely.
modeling," and it is
Yeah.
now they can go as far as Text-to-BIM. I have a 10-story building, and the bottom 2 stories are podium, and the model just generates right in front of you. Actually, it's a U-shaped building instead of a rectangular building. It's got 2 stories of car park, and there's also windows on the eastern side. And this all generates in real time, and you can then take that back to your desktop modeling software. So it is happening.
Mm,
If you think about how much businesses have invested in upskilling and training and
I
deploying
think that's
their
the hard.
current software systems, can you think like they're staring at this technology going, this is great, but this is exciting, but actually I'm going to have to train and pay for all of my current staff to understand how this works and pay for
Oh,
this software. So I think that's where some of the delay is, that we're stuck with what we've got until something comes along that's nice and cheap. Well, we can't move. And that's not the best
yeah.
to
Well,
go with.
and I think that's where we come back to, I think this is actually a time for, there's more innovative, smaller practices who want to do those types of things, could be
Yep.
testing and doing that. You still need those people who know what they're doing to
Yeah.
make sure and is in a thoroughly checking,
Yeah.
because otherwise it's like I don't it'll be very interesting where the risk and the liability is and all of that for
Yeah.
the insurances and stuff like that. So I think QA is just going to become a massive part. But
Yeah,
to do
definitely.
QA properly, you can't just be reviewing things. You need to be
Yeah.
understanding. So again, AI is only there to really assist people and to do that. But I mean, I think that's because that was one of the reasons I reached out to you, because I was like,
Mm.
this
Yeah.
has got to be, really, this
Mhm.
has to be. At the end of the day, if AI is about formulas and things like this, half of this is a formula, right?
Yeah,
You've got to
definitely.
understand. But if you're building, you're like, right, I need a core, we need to know
Yep.
this, we need the offsets from here, we've got these parameters. And I
Yeah.
just sort of look and I go, surely that is something that will
Yeah.
be prompted, can be prompted and
Definitely.
assisted way with AI.
And I think that's what's exciting. I can see the platforms that are coming out that are very much, here's my text and I get some geometry back. I get a
Mm,
modeling design. What's exciting for me though is I want to go the other way. I want to upload a drawing into Copilot or into whatever platform the AI is going to be and say, right,
yeah,
here is my building code of Australia and my national construction code. Are my handrails up to standard? Is this stair accurate for a class 2 building? Like, I want to do that level of QA because at the
absolutely.
moment, that's where the inefficiency is. You've got two or
Ah, see if
three
you can get the
people in
time.
the Yeah, well, I'm thinking like if I want to do a drawing review here, I've got to find the guy that's been here for 40 odd years and knows the construction code inside out and say, hey, can I schedule you for a review? Oh, you're already doing 10 this week. Cool. I've got to do it next week. That there's a huge inefficiency gap there. And I think
Absolutely.
I would love
Yeah.
to see AI in that space.
So is that the biggest, I mean, because obviously everybody was on drawing boards, then they went to CAD
Mm,
and, then they've gone to 3D, SketchUp, and then into Revit. Surely Autodesk is such a big organization. It must be doing something. Otherwise, it knows it's going to
yeah.
get toppled.
Yeah. So
Or, or
they're
it doesn't care because it's now Microsoft and can
yeah.
be.
Yeah, yeah. No, look, I was lucky enough to be at their annual conference a year or two ago, and they released Autodesk AI. There wasn't much around what that was, even
Mm,
if you go digging, but it just seems, I think I agree with you. They are collecting so much data off our models because our models are hosted in their cloud and terms and conditions and all this sort of stuff that they surely must be building something in the background.
yeah.
I don't know what they are essentially building. It
Yeah.
could be
Yeah.
all the
And
way
as you
into,
said, it's a bit more complicated than, a large language model.
mm,
Well, I don't know. Who knows,
yeah.
honestly. We'll find that out. But that's where I'm interested, I think, in the next 5 years. It will be very interesting. And, that's why I've sort of said I don't know if I feel like at the moment architecture firms often judge themselves by the size, the amount of people that they have.
Mm,
And I think actually they're better to be looking at the size and the caliber of projects that they're
yeah.
working on. And, the podcast we just did before this was all around marketing, understand who you're helping in doing that. And
Mm,
hopefully that's the other thing, you know.
yeah.
My only, like to be very open and honest, my only concern is how much will this shift to the builders? Because at the end of the
Yeah.
day, I'm seeing a lot of things in the industry at the moment where we have, early consultant interventions. We're getting builders on a lot earlier. Now, mind
Yeah.
you, I've moved from Victoria to Queensland, and it's a very, very different model up here. The builders,
Yeah.
rule up
Yeah.
here in comparison. Um, but at the end of the day, if you can't get it built,
Mm,
you don't have a project. So I would be very interested. I've seen a lot more firms and a lot more builders, like large scale builders, taking
yes.
on a little bit more of that BIM as well.
Yeah.
And I know you've had to do a lot of that BIM management
Yeah.
planning, things like that. What's your observations on what's sort of happening?
Look, I definitely see that continuing. So I've worked across, especially New Zealand and Australia, where you've got a lot of early contractor involvement because you want to set out, you have your pre-construction and construction BIM
Mm,
execution plan, or your design BIM and your construction BIM.
yeah,
So I don't see that changing at the moment. I think if you're looking at it through a lens of AI, it'll sort of be, well, let the architect do whatever they need to do to meet their deadlines and get the drawings and the model across. And then your contractors will basically use their systems to do the same thing to get it built. So I
yeah,
think there's a very clear definition of ownership there in terms of when you hand over to construction and delivery
yeah,
in terms of what technology you're using. I know there's some
yeah.
large contractors out there that are using AI on site at the moment to basically, there's a platform some of them use called Drone Deploy, and they fly the drone over the site every 24 hours and they can track mounds of soil and deliverables that are being dumped on site. They can
Brilliant.
basically walk through with cameras on their hard hat to get all of their daily site checks, feed that video into their AI engines and understand what's happening with progress and look at that against Gantt
Yeah,
charts. So
wow.
it's all working there, right? And on the design side, that doesn't bother me at all. So I need to be free to use whatever technology I need to
Yeah,
meet my
yeah,
deliverables and my data requirements. And I think that's
yeah.
okay.
Yeah, oh no, absolutely. And I think that's like, you get sent people to go and do site visits to meet, and you're like, why would you do
Yeah.
that? Like,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
put a bloody camera there and all sorted
Yeah.
out in 2 seconds for you.
Put a drone up in the sky and watch the video on the way home on the bus. Like,
Yeah, there you
easy.
go. Yeah, the things that I do on the road. All right, so we're talking a little bit about that as well. How do you think then having this as a tool will actually help architects and designers to actually achieve more or be able to bring more of their creativity?
So yeah, that last sentence is really important, right? I think there's been all this talk about how it's going to make us more efficient and we can do more and all this sort of stuff, and that's cool. But do I really want to do more? Like, I don't know about you. Like, I'm pretty busy at the moment, right? I'm kind of happy with that. But if I was an architect, I would be excited by AI in the fact that I can, and again, we've probably heard this a lot as well. I can farm out the more menial tasks like the
Yeah.
draw schedules, that sort of stuff, and I can actually use what I was trained in university to do, which is use my brain for creativity and creative problem solving.
Yeah.
And I said that to a bunch of graduates just the other day here because I was showing them some of the stuff I've been playing around with AI. And it's like, I want to pay you to be the best possible designer you can be and to use your creative problem solving to identify and solve a design problem. I
Yeah.
don't want to pay you to sit in Excel or in Revit or whatever it is and organize lines on a screen.
Yeah.
That's what we want to automate. And that goes back to the cliche saying about being efficient and doing more. But that's where I'd be excited about. It's paying people to be creative because at the
Yeah.
moment, AI can't replicate that. I think
Well, and
it
it's
can
always the
do it.
hard thing, isn't it? You bring these, you interview somebody and they've done 5 years of architecture, and
Yeah,
then you tell them, "We're just gonna sit you at a desk and you're gonna draw a bunch of lines on the
yeah,
same document. You won't be, doing any design work for about 5 years."
yeah,
And you see their
yeah,
soul literally die.
yeah,
Which is
100%.
I'm not laughing at that, there shouldn't be
Yeah,
it's like it is really, really difficult. They've got to learn how it
yeah,
goes together because at the same time, you can look at a bunch of folios and you're thinking, okay, how is that building going to stand up? What was the purpose? Where
yeah.
is the design process? Like, where is it?
Mm,
So going off and being able to do nice, pretty pictures is one thing, but actually making sure you're building a building that's going to be purposeful.
yeah,
But at the same time, if you can actually enable them to do
yeah,
the architects' minds are amazing. I think they're the most
yeah,
amazing professionals. Like to have big picture plus small detail to be able
yeah.
to visually conceptualize what they do. And whether
Mm,
you're a technician or not, you are an architect,
yeah.
not
And I
entirely.
think I
But
think that's where this technology is so exciting, right? Because if you let's say you've got an architect that's put onto a competition, right, for a hospital. Competition is going to run for, I don't know, 8 weeks. Let's be realistic. How many floor plate options can an architect generate in 8 weeks? Okay. But then if
Mhm.
you start talking about, and you can call this whatever you want, whether it's generative design, like AI, whatever it might be. But what if you were able to just say, hey, here's my bubble diagram, or here's a very, very rough concept plan. You need to focus on the patient areas and the outpatients and the
Mhm.
chemical, medicinal dispersory areas, like, and look at the orientation of the hospital on site for maximum daylight. Like if you know your parameters and your
Mhm.
rules for what you're trying to achieve, it must have 200 patient beds and etc. You can then generate 400 options,
Yeah.
right? And then without that being overwhelming, you can then say, well, actually, I want to prioritize daylight potential into hospital. There's 3 options. I actually want to prioritize pedestrian accessibility. There's 2 options. So people used to get worried that, well, oh my goodness, you're going to generate 400 options and that's no better because the architect's going to have to spend time sifting through all of them. Use the technology to sift through them. And then you get the best, because I think what does excite me is there a point in time where the property developer turns around and says, well, prove to me that this is the best layout? I'm a property developer and I want to fit as many one-bedroom apartments on this floor plate as possible.
Yeah.
If I was the property developer, they'd all be studio apartments with no windows, right? Maximum amount of dollars earned. But as a designer, they know that, hey, you want a mix of 2 beds and 3 beds and north facing and balconies, etc. So if you know your constraints, you can turn around to your client or your property developer and say, hey, it's almost like in school when you had to show you're working out for mathematics.
Yeah.
Here's my answer, and here's how I worked it out. And this is the best and
Yeah.
most optimal layout that's going to get
Yeah.
you the best yield, but keep your participants happy or
Yeah.
your people that live there happy. So, yeah, use the technology not just to design, but actually to prove why it's the best design.
Yeah. And it'll be interesting to see how people keep their hand in drawing and doing those types of things because at the
Oh, they
moment, it's
will. Yeah.
obviously more language model. By the way, if you have you heard of Whisper?
Yeah, I have,
It
yes. Yeah.
yeah, right? So you don't wanna be
Yeah.
told.
No, exactly
You just
right.
wanna be talking.
Yeah.
So, I think that's where those things will be coming out. It'll be very interesting to take your AI note taking from your client briefing, bring it out, what was it said in this, and then put it
Yeah.
into this is optimally what it is. But again, it'll be interesting how that changes the way that we think we approach things. They're great tools, but
Yeah.
how much are we going to still be interacting? Now, the one
And
thing coming back to your book is
mm,
at the end of the day, we have all this technology, and as Meg said, but we're human beings. We're here to flourish. We need to be
mhm,
using the technology to be helping us, not getting to the point that we actually don't know how to interact. And that's
yeah.
probably one of the biggest things is, you're exceptionally articulate and have the same ability to present and things as well. But a lot of people may not have that personality, one,
Mhm.
or as you said to begin with, offline was, a lot of people might be coming in and be able to great at using the technology, but
Yeah.
can they have a conversation?
Yeah, exactly.
So what are some of the things that you sort of think, if you were to give some tips for the next generation coming through or any professionals who are putting
Mm.
their in, what do you predict are some of the skills that we're going to see that we're going to be needing and enhancing as humans?
Well, there's only one answer to that, and it's soft skills. I absolutely believe that we are, and this is even pre-AI, we're losing that ability to have soft, meaningful relationships and interactions with other people. That whether it's me calling up a well-known phone company trying to sort out a bill and getting an automated voice on the end that can't understand what I'm saying, or I'm trying to order a pizza or whatever I'm trying to do, at some point, I just want to speak to a human. Things are already complex enough without adding this technology on top and not
Yeah.
understanding what you're trying to get out of it. So
Yeah.
the soft skills, absolutely. I think having that your personal PC in your pocket being a phone has just sort of, it makes me sort of loathe the fact when some people are like, "Oh, well, we're in a loneliness epidemic." I'm like, Are you surprised?" Like, we are so disconnected from one another because we're so into technology that we're
Absolutely.
talking about going and living in the metaverse when we're barely having lives in the real universe. So I
Yeah.
think just the boundaries with technology, I think, are critical, and they can be as basic as TV time or what you're feeding into an AI engine and how you're modeling technology in front of your kids
Yeah.
or with what peers and things like that. I think that's really important. But yeah, soft skills, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's more important than ever to be connecting. As Meg and I spoke about that, there's AI out there that's, it's become like the her
Mm.
or she, I forget which one it
Yeah,
is,
yeah, yeah.
the OS. And they've actually found that a boy committed suicide by, interacting with this. And it's hard. Like my kids sit there and we call Chatty, we'll be like, "Da-da, we had to have a birthday party on the weekend with a blue tongue lizard coming because he was obsessed and wanted to know about blue tongue lizards. And
Yeah,
Chatty could tell him a lot of things about blue tongue
yeah,
lizards. Which is fascinating because,
yeah,
my dad's like a walking encyclopedia, and then we're just doing this and we're like, "See, dad's pretty
yeah,
much you." But the thing is, though, you then become so reliant on that. So how do you make sure, particularly for
yeah,
our next generation, that it's a lot easier to have a relationship with a computer who says nice things? I think they've become a little bit more. I noticed the first versions were sometimes a little bit too nice. They've
yes,
become a little bit more pushback now. They've
yeah,
actually built that
yeah.
into some of the
But
systems to
then,
go, "No,
no,
you're not always right." So I
yeah,
can't say, "Oh,
yeah,
great idea, James. Oh my god, you're
yeah.
brilliant."
But then on the flip side though, for people that are socially awkward or socially
Yeah,
anxious, like I've had some people are like, I actually find great companionship out of talking to an AI because it can just
yeah,
sit there and listen to me and like not like I don't feel judged or anything by if I was to take a conversation to a peer group. I spoke to another parent the other night who said, "Look, I just couldn't face having another conversation with my son about Thomas the Tank Engine, so I gave my son ChatGPT, and he was still in his room 2 hours later, and the transcript is like 10,000 words. This little toddler just talking to ChatGPT about Thomas the Tank Engine. He's like, "Oh my God, I don't know whether I messed up or whether I've just stumbled on the best parenting hack of all time." But yeah, boundaries
yeah.
with technology, but then also if people are comfortable with it, that you've got to be free to make up your own mind about that, right?
Yeah. And I mean, we're at a slightly different point that our children are both, mine's just
Mm,
turned 5 today, but yours are little tots too. I
mm,
think talking to parents who have teenagers now and, what they're seeing their kids go through with social media.
yeah.
And we know all of this stuff. I mean, our brains are wired. We are tribes, right?
Mm,
We like to connect with people.
yeah.
That's how we are. We're social human beings. How we connect and what we do is how
Mm,
we've lived. We
yeah.
weren't in isolation. We survived by actually interacting together. But you're right. We also, for example, in Australia, we all sleep in separate bedrooms. We all don't have family. We're all very nuclear versus in other countries and other cultures. That is what you do. You come
Yeah.
together, you have lunches, you do that.
Yeah.
So we're still going to make sure that I sometimes think we're probably the worst at it because we're also from an individualistic
Yeah.
culture
Yes.
versus a collective culture where I think
Yeah.
it will only continue. But for example, the other day I was speaking to somebody who they did this fantastic thing where all they did was just get people together and have a discussion. And everybody in the office, they thought, oh, this will be bit of funny wank. Nope, turned out it was the thing that everybody loved the most. So
No,
I think that's the other thing
yeah,
is when we're going into organizations, particularly with remote working, working from home, it's then actually how we find those real connections,
yeah,
right? Not that necessarily that forced,
yeah,
but it's a little bit like going to pub trivia and,
yeah,
getting to
yeah.
meet people. I would say in this industry, it is an industry that I think does connect
Yeah,
very
definitely.
well.
Yes.
Mind you, I'm out and about talking to people and, I'm obviously a massive extrovert. But the same thing is that we need to remember we need to be involving that. So it's the same as we talked about with Meg. You might go into a meeting and everybody is, if you're these days, most of the PCGs are online. Most people might
Mm,
be sitting there on their phone before versus
yeah,
walking in, hi, how you going? Da, da.
yeah,
Remembering those small things is a lot easier to look at your phone versus putting in
definitely.
your pocket
Yeah,
and being 100% present in it.
yes.
So I think that's where we need to be present doing things. It's a little bit like if you're doing training online or you get webinars, and I'm like, I don't
Mm,
turn on your camera, look at me,
yeah, yeah,
and everything else off,
yeah,
and this is what we're doing.
absolutely.
Otherwise, you might as well not be here because your brain
Mm,
can't do two things at
yeah,
once, and it's complete waste of your time
you're not
to do it.
engaged.
You need to be there and be listening. Otherwise, you might as well just be watching a YouTube while you're,
Yeah, definitely.
washing the dishes or something like that.
Yeah.
So I think it's one of those things that we've said, and I think it's the same. It'll
Mm,
be interesting as our children grow. We have
yeah,
all these idealistic things we're going to do.
absolutely. Yeah,
I look forward to the teenage years when I'm trying to, oh, that's working, that's not working. But yeah, absolutely. All right. So finishing off, is there some things that you sort of think that people could be thinking about, learning about? Is there any podcasts, books, or anything like that that you could recommend to people?
look, there's one book, and I'm just about to embark on reading it for the third time because I didn't take enough notes the first or second time. But for architects, Machine Learning by Phil Bernstein.
Right.
He is one of the deans or professors at a university in America. Architect. Very, very well written book around
Yeah.
artificial intelligence and its impact in the architecture profession, and its continuing impact. Uh,
Yeah.
I
Wow.
could not recommend that book enough. Um,
And what was the author again? I've written it down.
Phil Bernstein,
Yeah.
and it's called
Right.
Machine Learning. The
Right.
other one, just because I'm a bit biased, but the other one would be Super Users. Super Users by Randy Dutch. This is that book is all about understanding your design technology and technology teams inside a business. And if you're going to have a technology team, you've got to give them the runway to really look at a business from top
Mm,
to bottom and
mm,
understand where there are options to make
mm.
efficiencies and to make changes. That's a really good book as well.
Well, and it's quite interesting, isn't it? Because most firms these days have, like, most costs always are people and then
Mm,
rent and then
yep,
technology. I think it's now people, technology, and
it
then rent,
is. Yeah,
depending on what you're
yep.
doing. So technology spend is becoming larger, but when you're talking about automation and AI, what you're doing is
Mm,
just shifting it around. And so, as you said, if we think about technology as about reducing the
yeah,
resources or their time, or how can we produce more,
yeah,
particularly when we're in, we're at the downturn of
mm,
the economics, every cycle, one every 6 to 12 years,
yep,
we're at the bottom and we're hopefully will go back up again as it always does.
yep,
This is actually a great time for organizations to be really thinking, how do we don't want to be fighting for fees and not being
yeah,
able to, we want to do great work. How do
mm,
we make what we're doing more efficient? And I think now we've got technology, it's always been there and that's what you've always been doing. But now I think you can't hide, you
no,
can't not realize what AI
yeah,
potentially is doing. And as you said, automation is one thing, AI is another. AI is one part of that automation.
yeah,
You've got to be thinking about how am I using technology more because we are living in a digital world.
yeah.
It was a delight to talk to James, and I always enjoy it. He and I could probably natter on this subject for ages. Unfortunately, we had a few technical issues at the end, so we actually had to cut the podcast short just after his recommendations. If you're interested in hearing anything more from James or myself, please feel free to reach out, and we very much enjoy and will continue this conversation on AI as it continues to form and develop.